All right, well, it's supposed to be recording in progress. All right,
Okay.
welcome.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming. I'd like to tell you the story of my first cousin, the man I consider the George Washington of Israel. And I'll explain that to you a little later. Only favor I ask is if you have any questions or anything to add, wait to the end because we have a lot to cover. It's okay if I take this down?
Yeah, as long as you're about 6 feet from
Yeah.
folks, that's fine.
Okay. His name is David Daniel Mickey Marcus. He was born on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, 1902. My mother was born 1901. That's how I come to David. They were childhood friends. The most popular question that people ask is, how did he get his name Mickey? He had an older brother, Michael. Michael was a big, strapping individual, and it was kind of his job to protect the elderly Jews from some of the anti-Semites in the neighborhood. And Mickey was quite in awe of his brother, and he followed him around constantly. So he was given the name of Little Mike, which over the years became Mickey. Mickey's father and mother were Romanian Jews. His father had a push cart selling fruits and vegetables, and he did very, very well. In fact, he did so well that he was able to get a stall in East New York in the market, and the family moved to East New York. Mickey did okay, well, in elementary school, but when he hit high school, all of a sudden he bloomed. Honor student, honor classes, won 4 letters in sports, football, basketball, baseball, track. And the teachers were in awe of him because he was in the top academically of the school. So they had a meeting with him and asked him what college was he preparing to go into. He said, I can't go to college. My father had died. My brother had quit school, and he was running the business and supporting the family. It just wouldn't be right for me to let him continue with this financial obligation, and I go to school. So the teacher said, let us see if we can come up with a solution for you. Well, about a week or 2 later, they had a meeting with him, and they proposed this. How would you like to go to college? Free. And not only free, but be paid to go to college. This way you could use some of that money to support your family. He said, well, where would I get such a terrific deal? They informed him that if you go to any one of the military academies, not only do you get a grade A education, but you're in the military, so you're paid as a military person. So he said, great. He said, now how do I get into the military academy? He said, well, you have to pass an entrance test. So the teachers got a hold of a few of the old tests and on their own time tutored him so he could pass the tests. And he did. And in 1921, he entered West Point. And as luck would have it, the first week he was up at West Point, he was put on report. And he had to report to the superintendent of West Point. So he reports, and the superintendent says, you know, we have church services on Sunday, and we take attendance, and you were not there. Why not? This is very simple. I'm Jewish. We don't go to church. We go to synagogue. Superintendent said, you know, I'm going to look into that and see what I can do. And he had one of his adjutants go around, and they found a rabbi who would come up on Friday nights and conduct Shabbat services. What I like about this story is that the superintendent's name was General Douglas MacArthur. And it's the second incident that I have found between MacArthur and Jews in a positive vein. I've done a lot of reading on MacArthur, and I've yet to find one instance of anti-Semitism, only positive. Anyway, Mickey goes to West Point, and he graduates class of 1924 when he is commissioned a second lieutenant in the artillery. Again, he was in the top percent of his class and academically, and he won 3 letters: football, gymnastics, and intercollegiate welterweight boxing champion. You can see a picture of him on the poster there. And just to top it all off, he also won a Rhodes Scholarship. When you graduate from the military academies, you owe the government 4 years service. That pays for the education you get. So after 4 years, he resigns from the regular army, but goes into the active reserve because he wanted to keep his rank and any privileges he had acquired. And he goes to Brooklyn Law School. Well, he graduates Brooklyn Law School, again, in the top percentage of his class. And at that time, the district attorney's office of New York City used to like to get the top students from Brooklyn Law to join their staff. And they contacted him, and he joined the DA's staff. He was there for a short period of time when he's called into the DA's office. The DA at that time was a man called Tom E. Dewey, who later on became the governor of New York State and twice ran for president of the United States unsuccessfully. He called him in and gave him a file and said, now you're going to be a lawyer. You are to prosecute this man. It's going to be tough because he has top-notch lawyers, but we want you to prosecute. Well, he did good. He got the man 30 years. You may have heard of the man, Charles Lucky Luciano. So after that, the mayor of New York heard about him and wanted him on his staff. The mayor of New York was also an interesting person, Fiorello LaGuardia. And he appointed Mickey the youngest judge in New York at that time and made him commissioner of corrections and commissioner of parole. Now, the Office of Corrections was riddled with graft. So Mayor LaGuardia and Mickey would get their staff and raid the prisons to see what was going on, how certain people were able to get a lot of favors, special food, special visitors. And they made a movie, there was a movie made about this. You could see it every once in a while on Turner. It's called Blackwell's Island. It's Blackwell's Island was a real place, but it no longer exists. It was changed to Welfare Island and then to Roosevelt Island. The movie is about an uncorruptible corrections department head. It's fictitious, but it's based on Mickey's life. In fact, and I haven't seen it because I never caught the movie from the beginning, but I understand the technical advisor on the picture with Mickey. It stars Victor Jory and an up-and-coming young Jewish actor, John Garfield. After this, in 1940, with war clouds on the horizon, Mickey rejoined the Army. He now had the rank of colonel because even though he had joined the active reserve, he kept on going to the Army war colleges and all of their learning. So he had gotten the rank now of colonel. And he was posted to Hawaii, where he was the military aide to the governor of Hawaii. And one of his duties was to create the Ranger School in the Pacific. He did it so well, the organization chart, that not only did they use it in the Pacific, but when they organized the Ranger schools for the European invasion, they used that organization chart. After that, because of his legal background, he was now transferred to the Adjutant General's office in Washington, D.C. As the new guy getting on board, they get the old cases, the one that everybody had a headache with. Well, it seemed Mickey liked that. And he would take them home, work on them on the weekend, and bring them back Monday, all solved, all finished. So he went from new boy on the block to problem solver. In 1943, Mickey was now transferred to London. And because of his law background, again, he was going to have the job that when there was the invasion of Europe, it would be his job to take over the municipal authorities in all the towns and villages and cities and convert them from their Nazi and Vichy French rule to small d democratic run. Also in 1943, he wrote the surrender document for the Italian army in World War II. He was very fortunate because between his two trades, as we might call them, military and lawyer, he was able to cover all the bases. In 1944, with the invasion plan and the word coming back from Europe, what was happening to his 6 million Jewish brothers and sisters and 5 million non-Jewish brothers and sisters, he had to get into the fight. But he was basically just an administrator. So we went to one of his classmates. His classmate's name was Maxwell Taylor. That may not ring a bell with you, But Maxwell Taylor was the general of the 101st Airborne, the parachuters. And he went to him, explained his situation, and special orders were cut for Mickey to parachute in on June 5th, 1944. The significance of that date is that the invasion was June 6th. He parachuted in with the Pathfinders of the 101st Airborne. Now, Mickey had never parachuted before. When he had gone to West Point, they weren't having parachuting at that time. So he was at normal or minimum parachute training is 3 months. He was given 3 hours. However, he was an athlete, so he was able to perform. So he parachuted in June 5th with the Pathfinders of the 101st. 75% of them were either killed or wounded, but they had a job. They had to report on the latest positions and disposition of the German troops. Well, the invasion was on, and Mickey stayed for a couple of months with the 101st, fighting with them against the Germans. And then headquarters caught up with him and pulled him out. And he was told, you are never to get into a combat situation again. We have millions of men with rifles. We don't have men with your brains. You stay out of fighting. And they transferred him to Patton's Third Army as a tactical and planning officer. As Patton rolled across Europe, he freed many camps, and they gave Mickey the job as the administrator of these people. It was his job to get them food, clothing, shelter, and medicine. And God knows how many tens of thousands of lives he probably saved. From there, he was now posted to Potsdam and Yalta as an advisor to Presidents Roosevelt and Truman. When you see Roosevelt and Truman, they're surrounded by admirals, generals, all kinds of senators, all kinds of lawyers. Mickey was still only a colonel. Generals don't even talk to colonels. But he had a job advising these two presidents. From there, 1945, he was posted back to Germany, where he wrote the surrender document for the German army in World War II. Then he was given this assignment. You are to create the trial for the German war criminals, the Nazis. Well, he did. He created the trial at Nuremberg. At Nuremberg, the chief prosecutor to the American side was a man called Robert Jackson. Robert Jackson was the former Attorney General for the United States. He was interrogating Goering. He was interrogating Hermann Goering. And when we see pictures of Goering, we see a big, heavy, almost jovial father. He was a very smart and clever guy. And by the time he got through with Jackson, Jackson was talking to himself. So they pulled Jackson and they replaced him. I'll give you one guess who they replaced him with. You don't make a horse's rear end out of a Jewish prosecuting attorney. Well, he got Goering convicted and sentenced to be hung. Unfortunately, somebody had smuggled in a cake of soap with a cyanide pill hidden in it, and Goering beat the hangman. Now, after being in the military for 25 plus years, he still only had the rank of colonel. When you see his pedigree, West Point graduate, all these important jobs, he should have had 2 or 3 stars on his shoulder. But I guess it was the H on his dog tag indicating evil. So he put in his retirement papers. When the Army heard this, it kind of hit the panic button. They wanted him. So they offered him, finally, if he would take the job as the assistant chief of the adjutant general's office, they would give him his general star. He said, thank you, but no thank you. He'd been away all of World War II. His wife was at home. Said no. Then the State Department got involved, and the State Department made an offer. They would give him the toughest ambassadorship that they had, ambassador to Russia, because we were starting to have trouble with Russia at that time. Again, he said, no, I'm retired. So he retired, and he and his wife had a house on Westminster Road in Brooklyn, off Church Avenue, if anybody knows that area. We lived on Avenue C, off Ocean Parkway in Church Avenue. So it was like we were within walking distance. And my mother, who had known him, in fact, when he was at West Point, my mother and her cousin Jean would go to West Point for the dances. My mother loved to dance, and she said Mickey was a phenomenal dancer. Also, the 2 young ladies, if they would happen to meet a nice Army officer, could have been a benefit to the dance. Anyway, Mickey sets up his own law office. And one night, there's a knock on his door. His wife goes and answers it. She was a school teacher. And there was the man introduced himself. Said, my name is Igal Egon, and I must talk to Colonel Marcus. She said, wait a minute. Told Mickey. Mickey said, let him in. It turned out Igal Egon was a shadowy figure. He was the right-hand man of David Ben-Gurion. But Ben-Gurion could not travel around. He was too well recognized. But Egon could do the jobs underhanded that Ben-Gurion couldn't. And he made this offer, where in 2 years, we are going for statehood. If we get statehood, the 5 Arab nations are going to attack us. We basically do not have a military force. We have some small pieces, but not enough. We would like you to go back, see your friends in the military, and see if anybody would want the job of organizing and leading our army. Mickey said yes. And he went back and spent a couple of months, and nobody would take the job. At that time, if you were even just an ordinary serviceman and you took a job with a foreign army, you could lose your citizenship be fined, and even go to jail. If you were an officer, you lost your rank, your pension, any of your benefits. Even if it was a friendly nation, you couldn't do it. However, the State Department, when it came to Mickey, looked away. It was funny. They didn't care. The only requirements the State Department put on him were you had to change your name. Your name became Michael Stone. Number two, you were never in the military. And the reason you weren't in the military is because you were studying engineering. And that was more important in the war effort than having you carry a gun. And if the British caught you, we would deny any knowledge of you. So he says, I will take the job on one condition, and one condition only. He had been in Europe, seen what happened to his people. I will take the job, no compensation. And then he started making trips back and forth in 1946 between the United States and Palestine. And again, the State Department looked the other way. And he does this, and he surveys what they have, and what they had was pitiful. So he goes there and he arranges a meeting with a couple of the military groups, the Haganah, the Palmach, the Stern Gang, the Irgun, and he lays it on the line with them. Very simply, all you people hate one another. None of you will give up your power base. And if you don't, there is no state of Israel. What you have to do is drop all your hatred and work together. Because if we work together, we can have one strong force. And the other way, the British would just destroy you one group at a time. So they didn't like it. It was like taking medicine when you're sick, but they knew there was only one answer. They had to join together. And that's exactly what they did. And the big problem was language. They had volunteers from 56 different nations came to Israel to fight on their side. But no common language between them. Imagine trying to run a unit where this one speaks this language, this one speaks another language. It's a headache and a half. But people were coming in from the camps in Germany and Cyprus. Their main job was to give them a basic military organization and learning. And then they had to have officers. At that time, they were just wearing different colored ribbons on their uniforms to show who was in charge. I believe it's this document right here. Somebody went to the Old Testament and found a name of a military leader. The word was Aluf, A-L-U-F. Aluf meant commander. That is higher than a general. And in the history of the Israeli army, there has only been one military commander, Mickey Marcus. They still use the word Aluf but they have downgraded it to just mean general. Mickey now designed the defensive plan for the state of Israel. He designed the offensive plan for the state of Israel. And he led their troops. They were going on truce one night. The next morning would be truce, 12 o'clock. And he went to the bathroom. On his way back, they had a new sentry, and the sentry challenged him in Hebrew. Mickey did not speak Hebrew. He answered in English. The guard shot. He was 46 years old. At his funeral in Israel, Ben-Gurion spoke. And Ben-Gurion said he was the best man we had. He was followed, I believe, by Perez. And I like what Perez said, a little bit better. He was there when we needed him. His body was now brought back to the United States for burial at West Point, where he is the only officer buried at West Point who died wearing a foreign uniform. Of course, the uniform of the Israeli army, the IDF. At his funeral, there was General Hildring, who was the head of the Adjutant General's office, Henry Morgenthau, who was Secretary of the Treasury under Roosevelt, Mayor LaGuardia, General Maxwell Taylor, who had cut the orders for him, was now a 4-star general and chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and 2 other people. When his body was brought back from Israel, as his honor guard was his lieutenant and his lieutenant's wife. Just to show you how important his lieutenant, the Marcus's commander, the lieutenant with Moshe Dayan. I promised that I would explain to you why I consider Marcus to be the George Washington of Israel. I found many, many similarities in their lives. This is the one part I want to do right, so I read it. George Washington, in his youth, served with the British Army. Marcus, in his youth, served with the Army at West Point. When their service with the Army was through, Washington retired from the Army and became a surveyor. When Marcus retired, he became a lawyer. When Washington took over the command, there was no professional army in the United States. It was a ragtag group of men, farmers, merchants, ship captains. When Marcus took over the army, there was no professional army. It was people who from the concentration camps who had to grab rifles. when Washington fought in the Revolutionary War, they fought against the best army in the world, the British Army. When Marcus led the Israeli army, they fought against 5 Arab nations and their armies. And their armies were all armed with everything from pistols to Spitfire airplanes, tanks. And it was led by junior and senior British officers. In fact, the leader of the Arab Legion was one of Montgomery's generals, John Glove. And there was no way Washington could defeat the best army in Europe. So he beat them. And there was no way the Israelis could beat 5 professional armies. But you know what? They did. When, after the war, Washington was promoted to general, Marcus was promoted to commander. There's a very, very good book on the subject. It's called Cast a Giant Shadow by Ted Burke. And if you have a chance, it's an excellent book.
It is a movie.
Yes, and it covers even more than I have covered here. Yes, you mentioned the movie. There have only been 5 men in the history of West Point who have had major motion pictures made in their lives. Patton, MacArthur, Eisenhower, Custer, who, by the way, had the biggest statue at West Point, and Marcus. One thing I forgot to mention, going back, there is now a synagogue up at West Point. It was a gift to West Point from a man named Edgar Bronfman.
Yeah.
Edgar Bronfman is the man behind Shenley and the big liquors. It was a present. Marcus was the first Jew to lead a Jewish army since the days of the Maccabees, almost 2,000 years. We never had our own country, and therefore we never had our own army. I'm trying to think. Oh, I'd like to tell you the story behind this and this. This is a publication by the United States Army. And the first story in here is all about Marcus and all his accomplishments. And the title is Out of the Shadow into the Light. And just want to show you. Yeah. That's General Maxwell Taylor, who cut the orders for him. Very interesting that even the American Army recognized him. This other item, the medal. I'm a coin collector. So I saw in one of my magazines an ad from a man who sells Israeli coins. So I wrote to him, told him who I was, and asked him, did the Israeli government ever issue a coin or a medal commemorating. I get a call back, but not from him, from a man called Mel Wax. I didn't know who Mel Wax was. Well, it turns out he is retired from that, the president of the American Israeli Numismatic Association. They issue medals commemorating, famous Jews, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, Hank Greenberg, Hedy Lamarr, and he said he was a great admirer of Marcus, and no, they have never honored it. He said, "Do you have some pictures?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Would you please make copies and send them to me, because we would like to honor him." Well, I did, and they got a very famous engraver, sculptor, Joel Ishkowitz, very well known, and he created that medal there. I never told some of the relatives that I was doing this, because every year they had been commemorating Marcus at West Point. They haven't done it for the last 3 years because of the pandemic. But I brought that medal up there and advertisements in case they wanted. It blew everybody away that I had done that. Well, I'm coming to the end, and I just want to say this. I've led you down a path, try to give you as much information about Washington and Marcus. The last thing I'd like to say is Mickey Marcus's birthday. It's February 22nd. It is the same birthday as George Washington.
Oh, interesting.
This would not be a country without George Washington. Israel would not be a country without Mickey Marcus.
Amazing.
Coincidence or Bishat? You make up your mind.
Excellent, excellent.
Any questions? Yes, Ruthie.
First of all, I want to thank you. You presented it so well, so understandably. I knew just vaguely about Mickey Marcus, and you explained it in depth. And I could sit here another hour or two and hear more. I really mean that. Thank you so much. Also, what happened to this person who shot him?
I can only relate a story that my rabbi told me. I belong to Oral Ohim. He said he went insane.
He went insane?
That's what the rabbi told me. Not Abramowitz, Rabbi Abramowitz. I don't know. There are certain things that the books just don't cover. Like Mickey had brothers and sisters. I have no idea, besides his one brother, Michael. Family just disappears in the book. And they didn't mention anything about the soldier. And it's wartime. Even in our country, Stonewall Jackson was killed by his own men in the Civil War. In the invasion at Normandy, there was a general, a 3-star general at that time, McNair, I believe it was his name. He was also killed by friendly fire. And if you want to hear a really tragic story, his son was killed the same week. Can you imagine a mother getting 2 telegrams? Your husband and your son.
So you mean to say that boggles my mind because of a language barrier, this wonderful person is killed. Couldn't they have a few Israeli words, necessary words, teaching him?
Look, the Germans couldn't kill him, but look, this, and yet, I'm sure if a person was able to talk to him, he might say, you know what? I have now made a country safe for my people. When they went back to Europe after world, even though they were there, they were hounded in their own country. They didn't even want them back. So now they had their own land.
Thank you so much.
And we just had someone who was on the Zoom right in the chat. Great talk. Thank you. Wonderful presentation.
So you said it so well,
Excellent.
clearly,
So clear,
understandably.
yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Very well done.
Anybody else?
Any other questions? Any questions from the Zoom?
I am just, I could sit
Did he
here
have a
another hour.
family of his own besides brothers? Was
Did he have
married
children?
or have children?
Never had any children.
Like Washington?
Unfortunately, his wife had a tragic end. She went blind.
Oh,
That year, she was a school teacher. I understand they did name a school after Marcus in New York City. But I've also been told they've changed the name of the school,
Do you know which school? Do you know the name?
Malcolm X.
No. The anti-Semite. Oh, my God.
They changed the name from Marcus to Malcolm X.
It's all.
Yeah.
all Unbelievable.
Look, the area changed and the people,
That live in the area. Didn't know anything about Marcus. We didn't care.
well, you see what happened? How many statues?
Yeah.
They took down the statue of Lincoln. They just, I think it was 2 weeks ago, took down the statue in front of the Museum of Natural History
Yes.
of Teddy Roosevelt,
Unbelievable.
who may be our third or fourth greatest president.
Yeah.
They took him down because somebody feels that it represents imperialism. The 99 good things he did.
Imperial, yes.
Yeah,
Thank you so much. You have a minute.
thank you for coming.
My pleasure. My
Thank you,
pleasure.
Paul.
Again, thank you.
It was fun.
Very clear.
You say it so well. Now I can see where you should continue lecturing about other things.
I try to do it all without looking at my notes. My brother, when he went to West Point, 30 years to the day after Marcus had his, he was also, why didn't you go to church? But he was ordered, you go. Who's head? Now is a synagogue, and in, I believe it was 1973, a bunch of midshipmen from Annapolis and a bunch of cadets from West Point got a lawyer, and it went to the Supreme Court, and they stopped forcing people